September meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Jim Eiserman.
Present.
William Scott.
Present.
Lee Bledsoe.
Present.
Ron Chesak. James Hayden. Jeff Rush.
Present.
John Murray.
Ron Chesbach is here.
Thanks.
Mr. Evans, could we have a report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, the agenda was posted Friday in accordance with state and local procedures.
Thank you. Are there any public comments at this time? No public comments. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes of last month's meeting. Are there any comments or corrections to the minutes as they were received? Did everyone receive them, first of all?
Yes.
Thank you, Loretta, again, for doing a fantastic job of minutes. Comments, corrections?
I had one correction. Wherever Nikki McLaughlin is listed, it's Nikki, not Mickey.
Nikki.
So, that was the only thing I found.
Any other corrections?
Sir.
I assume that's a no, so. Do I hear a motion that we approve the minutes as amended with the one change in the spelling of the name?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I think Board Member Scott was absent.
Right, I'm not voting.
Okay, so you abstained.
I abstain.
Abstentions, one, sorry. Chairman's report. I am pleased to announce that the City Council at its last meeting approved our recommendation for the designation of the Idris House, 1030 West Cielo Drive, as a Class 1 historic site. And that was done at last Wednesday's meeting. So I'd like to thank J.R. Roberts and John Bicardo, the owners, for working hard with this board and with planning to bring that before us and then before the City Council. And that now means that we have a total of 42 Class 1 historic sites in Palm Springs. And I have given you all an updated list, which includes the Idris House under the private home section. So thank you again if you're watching, J.R. and John. Other than that, I don't have anything to report at this time. So we'll move on to the architectural approval requests. And I believe, Doug, you had said the case number 1 folks are not here, so we could move on to case number 2.
Yes, sir.
Application by Movie Colony Hotel LLC to remove portion of exterior wall, closet doors, and overhang to reveal Albert Frey original design at 728 North Indian Canyon Drive. Do we have folks here that would like to speak?
Yep. Jing will give you a quick staff report, and then Frank Urrutia here is representing the property.
Basically, this is a Class 1 historic site, and that's why it's before the Historic Site Preservation Board today. The exhibits are actually behind you. You can see there's photos of the existing addition that they're proposing to remove, and the black and white photo of the original design that they're looking to bring the building back to. And then there's the existing elevations and also a proposed demolition plan. Essentially, the major work here being done is to remove a patio cover addition that was put on at some point and reveal the original design. And with that, I will maybe allow the architect to add anything if you like.
Excuse me, before we get started, why isn't this on our list of Class 1
I'm not sure it's designated.
buildings?
It's a Class 3 site.
It's actually a Class 3 site. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
got that confused with something else. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's correct. It was constructed in 1945.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Apologize for that.
Actually, my name is Frank Urruti. I'm with Urruti Architects in Palm Desert. Actually, my understanding, it was constructed in 1935. This is pretty well documented in Albert Frey's books. And the photograph, the original photographs, there are actually two photographs. There's one underneath that is very similar, just a different angle. But what we're intending to do is, as Jing mentioned, to take off the section that was added on at some point. We don't know what year that was added on or who or why. But there's been there's been quite a bit of work done to this building over the years. And in the original photograph, in the black and white photograph, you see the original building, and that was, at that time, it was the San Jacinto Hotel. And subsequent to that, there was another building that was built just to the east of it, also on the same site, and very the same type of architecture. We are proposing 2 phases of work to be done here. This is the first phase, to uncover the, or to remove the existing covered area with the vertical louvers and that roof area, and bring it back to the original design. And then we have a subsequent phase which we will bring back at another meeting, which we will discuss some other alterations which are also to update the building and incorporate some other Frey design elements.
Could you just point out which parts are being removed and then tell us what will be left when you remove what's there?
Okay, in this photograph here, you can see this portion here was added on, including this overhang. And this overhang here, also on the main part of the building, was added on at a later date. You can see from this photo here that this section here is this element right here. This is the original lower section here with the window. And in fact, what's happened is this covered area was actually enclosed. And as part of the second phase, we will be removing that and opening it up, also to bring back the overhangs. But at this time, all we want to do is uncover this, take this off, remove the overhang, bring it back to its original design. And in this drawing here, this is the front elevation of the hotel, and it has an overhang here now, and this element on the street side that we want to remove. And the profile that's originally there is a stairway, sloping stairway element that comes down in this fashion here and out. And in fact, in this photo here, which is a close-up of of this area right here, you can actually see the crack line, which defines that angle. So we would be removing this, and also this portion here, and then cutting back the overhang, so that this design feature remains. Basically bringing it back to its original intent.
Who did the original design, the design for that addition?
I have no idea.
And which part was designed by Albert Frey?
Well, the original building, the entire building, all of this building here and the subsequent building. was also designed by him.
What's under the louvered area? What's under there now? Is it
It's
a
a
terrace?
patio.
Patio.
Right.
Will it still be a patio?
Yes.
And then covered patio?
That's correct. Right, you can see it here. This is there was like a little overhang over on this, on the second floor here. And this was a patio out here. So what we're doing is the same thing. We're going to be removing this and using this as a patio. There's a unit out here that utilizes that area for a patio balcony area.
And you're doing this because you see this an improvement
Yes.
and bring it back to the original?
Does the city have no drawings that show about that addition?
No, we don't have construction drawings of that.
Thanks.
Just as a comment in response to that question, it has been fairly recent. The city has actually retained drawings, and the only way we could do that is the advent of technology that allows us to compress them into little plastic discs.
Any other comments or questions?
Will what is left look exactly as it is now? I mean, will the building will the repairs be painted the same color as the building, and floor finishes be the same?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to comment that I like the idea that it's going back to what the original look was. And I'd also like to have the architect suggest to the owners that they consider having this classified as a Class 1 historic site, because it is a significant building in Palm Springs. Have they considered that?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Just wanted to plant that seed. Any other comments?
Well, I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about I understand what's going on with this first, with the first phase of the plans. And I was just curious if the overall idea is to return the entire exterior to the original design in terms of finish and color, or have you gone that far with the plans?
No, we haven't gone that far yet. We will, as I mentioned, we're working with the owner to address other elements on the building. As an example, the entrance to the hotel.
Right.
That canopy that's there was not part of the original design.
Right.
We're not really sure that the original design is really in character with this building. Those are kind of issues that we have to look at architecturally. And another point that I want to bring out is some of the overhangs that you see on this building on the original photograph have a tile roof on it.
Mhm.
Which is totally out of character with Frey's traditional design work. And from what we understand, it was not really what he wanted to do originally, but that's the way it ended up. So there are a couple of elements on the building that we want to take a look at, and the owner is not really happy with the way the entrance looks at this point. They want to improve that. We're working on some designs to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have, unfortunately, any photographs or any drawings of what that looked like. We have some photographs of what the building looked like when it was unoccupied. And this is quite a number of years ago when it was up for sale. And at that point, I can show you the photographs that we have of the entrance. And again, it doesn't appear to be something that Frey would have designed. And so to take it completely back to its original design, I'm not sure that we can even do that.
Right.
Because we don't have the documentation to really do that.
Well, I guess, this may be a little bit beyond what we're approving today, but the curious thing about the building is, you know, the recent advertising for the hotel has been about this mid-century modern aesthetic. So it's interesting to hear that the building was actually built in 1935. And Albert Frey did a number of buildings that were not done in, you know, the same modern vernacular that we think of him today.
Right.
So it's one thing to restore the building to what it originally was. It's another thing to restore it to what we think it should have been. So I guess I would be in favor of trying to restore it to what it was, as opposed to second-guessing what he wanted to do or what we think he should have done. But that's, you know, my personal take on it. But I think it's great what you're proposing to do. I think is a really good idea in terms of, you know, because I've never could figure out the building, what was original and what wasn't. So this is a revelation to me to see these original photographs.
Any other comments? Do I ask for a motion for this, or do we, okay, do I hear a motion that we approve the application by the Movie Colony LLC to make the changes as we have discussed?
I'd be happy to make a motion to approve these changes as they've been planned to return it to the original roof line or profile of the building.
Okay.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Well, let's move on to case number 3, application by City of Palm Springs Fire Department to install 3 video surveillance cameras at Fire Station Number 1, which is a Class 1 historic site, right? 277 North Indian Canyon Drive. Do we have a staff report?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll just give you a brief
Should ask
overview, and then
them.
the fire chief and the security camera company are here. Basically, it's a proposal to install 3 video surveillance cameras at the Fire Station Number 1. They provided us with photographs here of what the cameras might look like, so I'm just going to pass these around. The first one I'm passing around is probably something that I think staff could support, showing the camera essentially located, you know, a little tucked away right into the brickwork of the building. The second one, we're probably a little less comfortable with mounting them on the fascia. Staff would recommend probably moving them in, maybe try and mount them in the corners or something like that, so we'll pass that around. But with that, I'll go ahead and let maybe the fire chief and the applicant come up here and
Since the mics don't seem to be making any difference, I'll go ahead and start. I'm Barry Freet, Fire Chief, Palm Springs, and the custodian of the building in question at 277 North Indian Canyon, known as Fire Station 1 or Fire Station 441. We have experienced vandalism to fire department property and personal property of firefighters over the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm in the process of installing security cameras at all the fire stations, and starting with fire station number 1. Mr. Hassett from DA Pacific has provided us with some photography superimposing the likeness of the cameras that he's proposed on the building. And as Mr. Evans had indicated, the one camera at the back of the station, first of all, I'll comment that all of the cameras would be painted to match the surface. They're white so that you can kind of get an idea of what their positioning is, but the color would be modified to match the appropriate background. Mr. Hassett had provided us with 2 options on this corner. One, as you see here, and I'm assuming that's the same one that's going around the table, and another one with the cameras out on the edge of the building. And the cameras on the edge of the building were not acceptable to me because we would have a likelihood of removing them with fire trucks as we passed by. So that one went out the window real quick. I will turn over the mic to Mr. Hassett so that he can explain not only these cameras but some other options that he has to propose. And also, I believe he has a superimposed photo with an angle from the street looking from Indian Canyon into the area, and I think that you'll see that whatever cameras put there will probably disappear in the clutter. But I'll turn it over to Doug.
Okay. Hi, good to be here. Nice to see you all. My name is Doug Hassett from DA Pacific. The original housing and mount that we proposed, the camera, this is actually the housing. It has a heater and a blower in it. Here in Palm Springs, we'll probably never need the heater, but you never know. But it has a blower in it to help give the camera some circulation and to protect it. This would hang down. This is actually more like an L mount. I just happen to have that, but this would actually come down on a J mount. It would come down from the underneath side of the overhang and come into the bottom of this, and this would obviously be angled to wherever we wanted to view for surveillance purposes. You can pass this around if you'd like. The mount is the J mount is about 14 inches in depth. We can also pass this around. These are the photos. The black and white photos are there's just hardly enough there for you to see. But when you're looking at that back corner from the street, regardless of what you put up there, you probably won't really see anything obtrusive or offensive. This is a very standard unit for outdoor housing of a surveillance camera. That's very common, and we could paint them so that they would match either the overhang or the brick or wherever they were going to be placed. That's a common thing to do to try to make those go away and mesh into whatever they're mounted onto. If you chose to be or wanted to be a little bit more discreet about the look of the building and the actual camera on the building, this was another choice we came up with. This is a surface mount. There are flush mount domes on the market, dome cameras. This is a little mini dome, they call it. This happens to be for outdoor use. But if we try to flush mount something into this overhang, especially, we're going to have to cut quite a large hole in that corrugated, I'm assuming it's a steel, corrugated steel or corrugated, it could be fiberglass, but I think it's steel, surface. And I don't really want to cut that large of a hole into that material, so I would prefer to surface mount. This is another surface mount, obviously much smaller. This unit does not come with a heater or a blower, but the camera's rated up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. If we're underneath the overhang, at least we have the shade. Would probably never be in direct sunlight, so certainly the 140 degree rating would be. And we have put these out in outdoor locations previous to this, so we have some experience putting them up and seeing that they do well in outdoor areas. So I can pass this around too, and you can see it. And this is it's an impact resistant dome, and it's also a solid aluminum housing. So here again, the camera just goes in that. That's not the camera itself, but there's quite a nice camera that goes in there with a high resolution, produces a high resolution video picture. And so it's up to, I guess, you members here to decide what is the best. If I was going to make a recommendation myself, I would go with the larger unit just because of the fact it does have the blower, it does have a heater. If it does get cold, it just gives the equipment that you would be purchasing for the city or that the fire department would be purchasing a little more lifespan, I believe, just in my own estimation.
Can that unit be wall-mounted?
It can also be wall-mounted, yes.
One of the suggestions that Mr. Evans made was to move the camera, whichever camera, back against the wall. We would lose a lighting capability, and we would lose angle from the camera viewpoint also.
I'm still a little unclear as to exactly where you're placing the cameras, assuming we're facing the building from Indian Canyon. Are we talking the corner on the southeast?
We would be placing them on the corner of the southwest.
Southwest, in the back of the
In the
building?
back, we're surveilling the back of the building, not the front of the building. These are all at the back of the building.
So when this corner right here is the southwest corner?
This is the southwest corner.
Okay.
That's
And then
correct.
the other photograph of the other
Is the
camera?
is the northwest corner.
Northwest.
So
in the back
everything
of
is to the back of the building, yes.
How does the wiring run to these? Is it exposed or is it?
12-foot poles, no.
Actually, what we would have to do is we would have to obviously penetrate this overhang enough to drive screws into it to mount the unit. We'd also have to drill at least a half-inch hole to run conduit and cable into the building. So, and then the only other way to do that is to obviously surface mount the conduit to the surface of this overhang out to the camera. So in order to hide it, we're going to have to run that coax in between this distance here and then into the building. And then once in the building, we'll follow, I believe there's a fairly common path, and there are a couple of common paths where cables have been run for various projects.
Yeah, I might add that that the building has been breached in a number of spots for electronic equipment. So they could go through that same race.
Okay, and then another question, what about mounting these on something, not on the building, but on a pylon, on the fence that's across from it, something that doesn't attach to the building?
We can attach the cameras to any number of poles or other walls, anything that's available. That's I just, from my own memory, I don't recall what's there that's at a certain elevation where, number one, it couldn't be vandalized or gotten to. Once the cameras start getting away from the building, they need to be certainly at a height where people can't get to them, and something that's sort of unscalable, with at least without a ladder anyway. Preferably something they'd have to get to with a man lift. You just want to make it difficult for people to get to them. That would be my only comment there, but they can mount to any number of surfaces.
And there is nothing existing that would meet the criteria that was just described. And to do that would not only need to erect a pole to do that, but also that would increase the cost of the installation considerably, because we would have to then run conduit subterranean and up the pole.
If I could comment, when we looked at this, the idea was to try to find locations that would be as close to invisible as possible. And we had suggested, instead of tampering with and touching, the metal, because that's probably the most fragile part of the building, to come back in and maybe see if you could mount on the building wall. We weren't aware of this camera, option, and if it could be mounted, on the building and still, the camera pick up the majority of the angles. It's probably the least noticeable. you know, to just mount it like that. Relatively small and would take a couple of penetrations through the building. And I would bet, at least in one of the camera locations, looking at the condition, you know, of the building, it's been tampered with considerably more than a couple of drill holes. And then out on the corner of the building, you know, I've not gone out and looked at angles and things of that nature, and would certainly respect the opinion of the provider of the equipment and the fire chief on angles. You know, whether or not, if you put it up on the building, you could actually, you know, get enough of the view angle to protect all the areas. You know, obviously we're experiencing the same thing everybody else is experiencing all over, and that is buildings get vandalized, and we're not unique, and we need to go back and protect the resource. And obviously at a firehouse, there are times where it's very obvious that the firehouse is not occupied when they go out on calls.
Do you, in terms of a deterrent for crime, do you find that just having the camera keeps people away, or is it necessary that it has this complete view of everything?
Well, cameras are a deterrent, but I think we've all seen the evening news where the bank robbery takes place and people are more than willing to rob banks knowing full well that there are cameras there. We also provide a lot of cameras for check cashing institutions, these smaller individual businesses, and people walk in there all the time and cash bad checks, and they get their picture taken, and that's usually a still photo. And they'll stand right there and cash a bad check, but they still are a great deterrent. Many people will walk into a place, see a camera, and walk right back out. And in many instances, and in most instances, actually, you'll keep that person away. However many
Right.
people that is going to be is always unknown. But there are people that will go case a particular building and see a camera and go, don't want to do that.
Well, I'm a little confused. If you have a camera on the exterior of the building, that's to see people going into and out of the building? I'm assuming whatever they'd be stealing would be inside the building. Are you talking more vandalism?
We're talking vandalism primarily. Just to give you a little history, about 3 years ago, we had a fire station, an arson at a fire station. And the only way you get into a fire station to light a fire is from the outside. And if we had cameras on there, we would have been able to have had images of that individual who was later caught and incarcerated. But in this case, we have an instance where somebody is vandalizing personal automobiles. So the damage in this case is taking place outdoors consistently.
And these automobiles that belong to the firemen, that they
That's
park
correct.
behind
The
the
personal
building?
automobiles, where they park their automobiles during the day. They work 24-hour shift, so their automobiles are parked there during the day for 24 hours. And while they're away from the fire station, damage is being perpetrated to their automobiles.
And so when there is a fire, everybody leaves and there's no one left at the fire
That's
station?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, following up on what Bill suggested, if that's the primary problem, it would seem to me that maybe there's some place away from the building that the automobiles could be under surveillance.
These
Maybe-
cameras cover the automobile area. This is the parking area for the personal automobiles for the fire department
Well, I
personnel.
was just thinking maybe there's a place the cameras could be mounted in the parking area as opposed to the building, if that's the main issue. I don't know. I'm going to assume that
This is the parking area, though. What this is looking into is the parking area. So it achieves what you're suggesting. Now, whether it be moved off the building or not, that's a point of discussion.
Right.
However, these cameras do cover the personal parking area within the fire department space.
Okay. And my other comment was that while aesthetically I much prefer the smaller camera, from a deterrent point of view, what you said, a person walks in, to me that doesn't look like a camera. Maybe that's a good thing, but if you want to use the camera to, I mean, I know people who put up cameras that don't work because they think they deter burglaries.
Right.
That small one wouldn't have a deterrent element, I wouldn't think. at
It wouldn't
all.
have as great a deterrent. I mean, obviously, somebody's going to recognize the larger unit far more, before they'd recognize the smaller one. And likewise, we would have to look at the site again. I always like to go back and double and triple check things, but if we could mount the cameras further in or actually attach this to the wall off of that other mount, we could look at that, but I was a little fearful of what the lighting might be like and what the overall angle of view might be like. When you start moving in closer to the building, there are things that you could lose, but we would just have to go back and look at that again.
One other question, I'm assuming that when whichever camera's installed, that there'll be signage saying these premises are being surveyed by camera, or?
That would be up to the city as to whether or not they wanted to put up a sign. Mostly you put up signs when there is what they call some expectation of privacy, but in a public, well, it's private property, but the parking lot is just sort of a, I don't know if you'd call it a public place within a private place, but it's a parking lot, and really when you're out in the open like that, there's really no expectation of privacy, and it's my personal opinion that if you don't have to put up a sign, don't put one up, because you know, it does obviously have its own deterrent element just in the fact that you've got the sign, so there's that side of it too, but I personally wouldn't do it.
Well, I was thinking that in terms of I think the lower profile camera would be the better solution in terms of preserving the integrity of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And that coupled with some sign, I believe it's a chain link fence that opens and closes into the parking area. So having a sign on that fence saying, you know, this parking lot is being surveyed would be, coupled with a lower profile camera, would then solve the problem of, you know, people being aware that there's a camera there, and that serving as a deterrent.
The gate, as you point out, is a chain link gate, and that will be something I'll be coming back to you about in the near future, about automating that gate.
I have, just in terms of installing this equipment, thinking about when it is removed, you know, in 10 years, 20 years, whatever, how to repair the damage that is done, the screw holes, the drill for the wires and so forth. I'm just tossing this out there, but I would think it would be easier to repair the metal than to repair the block work. To repair, patch, and paint the metal than to repair.
Did you look at that
patch
picture?
the block work.
It looks like the metal's pretty hard to repair.
Well, it hasn't been
Looks
repaired.
like it needs a little help.
It needs to be repaired, but it.
That's evidence of many, many repairs.
I just, because the block is a color stone aggregate and cement, repairing a hole would be more difficult in that than in the steel, I would think.
I think that's probably true.
I do think part of the issue from an architectural, or preserving the integrity of the building architecturally, is that the repairs to the steel might be more visible, and also the lines of that building are part of what makes it, or you know, with the portico, et cetera, are what makes it, you know, so architecturally significant, or partially significant, because that was a hallmark of his work, et cetera. So anything that kind of destroys the lines of the building, which I think, you know, these cameras on those hooks hanging down off of that, you know, would be something that I personally would be opposed to, even if it's because if you're repairing the brick and it's sandstone color, it seems like you could do things with color there that would make the repairs fairly, or, you know, once it was repaired, fairly unnoticeable. Whereas trying to match the steel, and well, no, you don't think so? Okay.
Well, the steel you paint, so it can be painted, and each time you paint it, it looks new, whereas the block work, because it ages over time and it absorbs the pollution in the air and the dust, it changes, and you'll never be able to really match it. You'll always see that there's.
Is that defined as the patina of the block?
Patina. We have no pollution here, we just have patina.
But in terms of repairing the metal, if you were to go with that option, and if you lose pieces of metal in installing this, you would then weld in new?
Well, I don't think you'd lose metal, you'd just
wouldn't.
drill a hole or something. And
So how do you replace a hole on a
There-
curved surface?
there's actually metal bonding material in which you can patch metal holes and sand it down, and then you
Are we
repaint.
assuming the crime rate's going to drop dramatically? We won't need cameras in?
Well, they may
Well-
need some new camera, or it may the fire department may decide they don't want to have a fire station there anymore, and it gets turned into a museum or.
Right, this is
Well,
true.
And I think the size of cameras will shrink. I don't think they're going to get any bigger than.
Mm-mm.
That was my next question. You presented two options here, but it occurs to me that there may be yet another option that's even smaller, because I believe in places like Las Vegas, you see, cameras that are this big.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an option, or is there a cost for?
Well, a camera that's really small, in fact, is what goes inside that smaller dome. The problem that you have as the cameras get smaller is what are you actually going to put them in? They can't be out in the open. You can't, the smaller cameras, or a lot of them are made to go for indoor applications, and even at that, they're usually still behind a dome, and usually most domes aren't much smaller than that. But you can do all sorts of things to make them covert. I mean, you could put them in, they put cameras these days in like a single gang electrical box that has a little pinhole in the front of it, and you don't see it. But the problem with those is you have usually a poorer quality picture, and you have a limited angle of view. As cameras become more and more covert, they become more fixed, and they have less. Well, for instance, both of the cameras that go into both of these housings, those cameras are what they call, they have electronic auto iris, so the iris to the camera actually fluctuates with the amount of light that's there. It senses that, and it closes as it gets bright, and it opens as it gets dim. And they also have a field of view that's adjustable. It's called a varifocal. You can narrow the view down, or you can open it up so it's wider and sees more. As cameras become more covert, usually the auto iris feature goes away first thing, because there's just too much going on there to put into a small camera, and usually the varifocal aspect goes away, because there again it just takes a larger piece of larger lens to do that. Those things do exist, but generally just in the fact that you have to hide them some way or another, it limits you as to what you can do and what you can see. But certainly they do get smaller. But I would personally just say that the smaller dome over here, from what I've seen and what I've experienced as far as exterior rated pieces of equipment, that's about as small as they get, unless you decide to flush mount it in the wall or in the ceiling, but then you have to obviously drill a bigger hole. So this is a good solution to being a little more discreet.
I just have one technical question.
Mm-hmm.
If you mounted this to the corrugated underside,
Mm-hmm.
how does the flat surface flush mount to this curved surface?
Well, what we would have to do literally is, I believe there's 3 or 4 screw holes in that base.
Mm-hmm.
We would have to mount, preferably to the ridges of the corrugation, and that would leave a gap up in there. But hopefully, and it would just be a little bit of an experiment, but hopefully we would find a ridge where we could obviously mount the camera to, and then also a place there where we could run the wires up into the corrugated metal and across into the building without leaving any cable exposed.
Right.
There's also, I guess, and there's another point to this, there is an additional base that you can buy for this camera, and I believe it's about 3/4 of an inch or an inch thick, and it allows for a side conduit entry to the unit, so that if you chose to run conduit on the surface, maybe in one of the valleys of the corrugation out to the unit, you could go through a side conduit base and then not penetrate the area with another hole to run the cabling through. But you'd have to run that conduit then probably out through the brick. So that's...
Right. Well, I guess my preference would be for the dome mounted to the brick. I just think weighing what it's going to do to the profile of the building, and to what is obviously a fragile corrugated steel structure. So.
I think my preference would be the same, to have the dome mounted recessed on the brick, as Jing had suggested perhaps we could do. It's a question of whether that's going to work or not. You don't seem to be comfortable with that as an option.
Recessed into the brick?
Into the brick?
No.
Move back onto the building.
Okay, yeah. No, that would be fine, and I think that Chief Freet and I can go look at that carefully and make sure we aren't losing any of the areas that we want to see. I think that's the main thing to do, is to make sure that we really see the areas where the vandalism is occurring, and if for whatever reason moving them back in eliminates the very security they're trying to create, then we might have to go to a Plan B.
Well, again, I would think that if, you could consider signage on the entryway to the, to ensure, an added measure of security. And then also if lighting is an issue, if it's against the building, I think there might be able to, with existing lighting, there may be some wattage could be turned up. There's or additional lighting in the parking lot area to help that visibility, if that doesn't provide you the same level of vision that the large ones would. But that would be, so I'm agreeing with what Jim and John said, and would say, in order to improve visibility, look at lighting solutions in the parking lot rather than, leaning back towards the larger camera.
And that would be something that we'd have to look at is lighting.
From a procedural point of view, can we approve something like that today, or do we need to have them come back to us next month with a solution with exact placement of the cameras? Madam Planner?
You mean in terms of approving the location of the cameras today as the...
Well, right now we don't exactly have a location. We
Right.
have a location on the overhang, and we've all suggested moving them back to the wall, not recessed into the wall, but exterior from the wall. But, and you've indicated you think that would work, but we don't really have any specifics about that.
Why
Is
don't we leave it so that if we approve it, that one member of the board, you or whoever you want,
Right.
work with the fire department and with Jing to approve the final installation?
I would need something a little bit more expeditious than waiting another month
Right.
and another approval process or review process. This issue at this station has been ongoing since June. We have a contract with DA Pacific for installation of cameras that you see before you. We've held off on the installation, waiting your meeting today, so that's another 30 days we've lost, and vandalism continues. So I would strongly support the suggestion that you set up a subcommittee that work with us and give us the final approval, review, etc.
My final comment would be is that if we move these back to the wall and mount them to the wall, and the bases are painted as closely to the color of the brick as possible, obviously that's not going to be an exact match thing. But if you move them back, and then with the fact that it's got a smoked cover to it, it's going to be pretty well, hidden. I mean, it's going to be right there. It's going to be on the surface, but it's not going to be something that I don't think that you're going to take that much note of as you look at the building. I think it'll be pretty discreet in its appearance.
And along that line, again, if you note, there are already 2 items that are hanging from that wall. There and there. I believe they're horns or loudspeakers that were installed probably back in the 50s or 60s. So they're already in place, and they're kind of a patina color. And they exist on the building. These cameras, probably, as Doug indicated, the only thing that would be visible would be the smoked dome, which would probably match the patina of those 2 items.
Are those existing items functional?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
Do I hear motions?
I'll make a motion that we approve, it's 3 cameras we're talking about, 3 cameras, wall-mounted, the the wall-mounted dome with the housing painted to match the sandstone brick. Final location to be approved by, I guess it could just be approved by Jing.
Right, you can either, you can appoint a subcommittee, or you can defer to staff based on the
Well,
direction from
I'd like for a
HSBB.
couple of people on the board, and I would like to be one actually, and perhaps you, Jim, as well, to
Sure.
at least review it with you. It
Sure.
can take 5 minutes. We could run down and take a look at it.
Sure.
And so
Okay.
I'd like to, if you're willing, to make a subcommittee of the 2 of us to take a final look at it in the next 3 days, if that's all it takes.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor of the motion on the table? The motion has been made, as I guess we understand it, to approve the process of putting the smaller cameras onto the building, 3 of them, subject to a quick final review by the subcommittee of Jim and me. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Question, Mr. Chairman. The approval was for the domed camera for all 3 locations, is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes?
I have one other item. Since we're going to be talking about this in a little bit, it's not connected with your application, but it's come to my attention that the building does not have the historic plaque mounted to it. Do we have a historic plaque for the fire station? And would you agree to have it attached appropriately to the building?
Only on a corrugated surface.
Only if it has a patina.
No, that'd be fine, certainly. And up in the front of the building somewhere, perhaps where the doors are, where people
So
would...
you two guys can
Yeah, we'll
do
take care
that
of
when
that.
you're there. Do we have a plaque?
We do have a plaque.
I'd have to look into that. This was, I think, designated sometime before I started with the board, so we'll have to look back at our records.
Well, it was in that pile of plaques.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So,
Hostage.
thank you.
Yeah, get it out here.
Oh, here you go.
Thank you very much. You toted that around enough, huh?
You have your G.
We also have case number 3.0685, application by Ingleside Inn to repaint the building. Oh, good. Abstention. The board will now look at the case to application by Ingleside Inn to repaint building at 200 West Ramon Road. And could we have a staff report, please?
This is the Ingleside Inn, a Class 1 historic site, and Dominique Daniels is the
Hello.
representative who will actually speak to you about the repaint proposal.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are in the process of renovating 30 rooms that exist at the Ingleside Inn, and my company has been
Excuse me,
hired.
could you give us your name and your...
Yes, my name is Dominique Daniels. I'm with Daniels Design Associates, and I was hired by Melvin Haber, who is the owner of the Ingleside Inn. And I was hired to renovate the 30 rooms, which were in great need of renovation. The exterior of the property has had some changes over the years. When we came on board, which was approximately 2 months ago, there were several issues involved. I noticed that the exterior gates, for instance, I don't know if you have exhibits to see. We have some photographs on the wall, and I can certainly pass this around to you. But the entry gates here, which is the first picture, the property, which is a historical property, is looking like a New Orleans-esque sort of burlesque with white gates in front. I don't know when the gates were painted white. There are layers and layers, probably, 12 layers of white on these iron gates. It was my observation that the property has probably 3 distinctive styles incorporated with its design. It is a California adobe. It is a Santa Barbara mission style. It also has a tremendous amount of Andalusian influences with doors and a lot of colonnades and different types of cast stone elements. So what we would like to do, one of the issues was the patina on the exterior paint, which has been whitewashed white over and over again with multitude of different tones. Some of the older areas that had not been finished or whitewashed had a very nice amber to it. And so one of the things that we would like to see would be to consistently put a glazing or amber effect, if you would, on the exterior finish so that it doesn't have this, I don't know how to describe it. Right now, the way he's been handling the finish, it really is looking not old world, not historical, not classic at all. It's looking comical. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to strip the white paint off the gates, the iron gates, and restore them to their original condition. All the archive pictures that I have seen, of course, are black and white. There really are very few color pictures that exist. But of course, wrought iron is wrought iron, and originally it was black. It was a graphite finish, which is what I'd like to see. The lighting fixtures on the pilasters are also painted white. And again, it really looks like we're in New Orleans when you look at that property. It really doesn't look like it did. So that is what I'd like to ask your permission to do, is to bring a little bit of old world feeling back to the property. And of course, we're doing our best to bring it back to its original historical state.
I'm sorry, I have one question for staff. Do we have a copy of the original designation in terms of what was considered the defining elements?
You know, I don't have that with me, but I did look it up at the time, and there really wasn't, I guess the way that the resolution was written, it didn't actually, point out the defining as we do today with our current designations, so.
With my little bit of research that I did on the property, the present owner has had it for almost 30 years. When he purchased the property, it was quite dilapidated in its state. So there was really very little original artifacts at the hotel when he purchased it. There was a designer that was hired which did incorporate a lot of the different types of schemes that I'm explaining to you, such as the carved Andalusian doors and the cast stone pillars. And then there's a lot of Portuguese tile influence throughout the property. There was a fountain that was added, which is a very small putti, which is not original to the hotel. And that putti fountain is not in an appropriate scale for that courtyard, unfortunately. So we have made some recommendations, of which may be represented to you when he is ready to make those changes. What we're trying to do for him is to bring it back to what it should be. You know, it is a landmark in the desert, and it is historical property.
I'm impressed that you're going to be doing something about this, and I fully support it. Some questions about the paint. Is this proposed for all the buildings, and the exterior wall, every bit that is now painted white would be painted this color?
Every bit that is now painted white, and it's painted many different shades of white. We have a lot of deterioration of the surface of the structure in itself, and he really hasn't done much in repairing it. At one point, we discussed doing perhaps a Venetian plaster or something to keep the stucco intact and to repair some of the cracks and whatnot. But then the cost of that was so extreme that we looked at it again, and we thought a glazing, a very subtle glazing, ambering over the existing white would bring it all in together and would make it easier for him to do on-site repairs with the glazing. Now he has people that just slop on the material. This is cost effective for him, but it's making the property look really cheap. So I feel in some of the older areas that we looked at, it naturally ambers over time. And the ambering with all the different influences, the very dark Andalusian doors and now these pillars and whatnot, really makes it look very elegant and classy. So when we examined that area, we then duplicated what we saw there to bring in as an exhibit for you. And it's my feeling that probably years ago, although the building started white, over time, it ambers.
But the point is, he's going to paint the entire building.
The entire building. It is
entire complex.
actually covered in a tremendous amount of shrubbery. I don't know how many of you have actually seen this property, but it is shrouded with it is encased in vines.
My question too, right, to the fencing, to...
Everything that I can get to, because I have had a tremendous amount of, incredible landscape architects go out to the property, really trying to get Mr. Haber to address the dire need of the re-landscaping of his property. And at this particular time, he's not willing to remove any of the weeds or the shrubbery as it exists. So those areas I will not be able to address. But yes, anything visible I would like to glaze, and I would also like to present to you an exhibit of some existing paint that we took off the walls to indicate to you that it was not always white. We have found a sort of an oyster color, which I don't know when they decided they were going to do this oyster color, but it at one point was an oyster white, which I'll let you take a look at. But really, when I removed some of the areas where there was a pocket of weeds, I discovered this wonderful amber patina, of which I think would be very appropriate and cost-effective for him to just simply glaze.
I'm a little confused. You talked about gates and changing the gates from what I believe now is a white color back to a black color. You talked about repainting the building, but now it sounds like it's more resurfacing the building.
Well, there's a lot of surface cracks that, of course, have never been repaired over time. I elect not to repair those and to leave them alone because he cost effectively does not want to address them. Okay.
So this is a process that would correct those cracks as been replastering, but you don't have to replaster.
Exactly.
And then you talked about light fixtures that were painted. I don't know, were you planning to strip those or change
All
the
of
color
the
those?
wrought iron, which includes the lighting that has been there for many, many years. Actually, there's probably 2 pairs of original lights that are on pilaster that are of a wrought iron nature. They would be very, I would say, 1920s style. They're very ornate. They were painted white, as were all of the gates. About 30 years ago, when he started, when he owned the property, when he purchased it, he decided to paint everything white. So we have years and years and years. I mean, I can peel the white paint off the original wrought iron gates. When I looked at the archival photographs, I realized that they were a really lovely graphite black, as we all know the Adobe gates to be.
Do you have some of those photographs that you can
Yes,
share
they're
with us?
circulating now. We just
No, of the original look, the archival.
no, I don't. Basically, the gates were black. They are a standard wrought iron graphite black.
But do we know for sure that the gates weren't painted when they were installed? And that's my point. They may have been white always.
No, they were not, because the photographs indicate that, originally, before he purchased the property, the gates that existed there. Now, I believe that, there were many renovations made, and I don't know exactly when. He did not say that he painted them white, but at some point they were painted white. Now, there are photographs that are quite old, where there's really nobody around the property. So to age the photographs, I mean, they could be, 1910. There was absolutely no one on Bellardo, to give you an example. There was nobody around the front of Ramon. So these are very old photographs. And those gates originally were black. When he purchased the property, they were all white.
The point I was going to make, and again, I am pleased to hear that, that Mr. Haber is taking an interest in upgrading his property, because based on what you said, it looks fine to me, but based on what you said, it sounds like it needs it. But it sounds like it's more than repainting the building. It sounds like we're changing the color of the gates, we're stripping paint off light fixtures, we're changing the finish as well as the paint of the building. And I personally would like to, from our perspective, would like to see a little more information, why we're going back to black gates. If they're old photographs that show them black, I think that's a good thing. I'd like to see that. Or to see what light fixtures are going to be changed.
I'm not changing any light fixtures. What I'm doing is I'm stripping the paint from white to its an original black. I mean, I think that in one's mind, one can surely envision these are historical fixtures which have been there that at some point had been painted white, which I now want to remove the white and have them go back to the way they were, which was historically correct. Now, it looks like it's a property in New Orleans, which is not correct.
Well, I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans, and it doesn't look like New Orleans to me.
You can't stand it. Speak.
I've been in New Orleans a handful of times. That's where the black wrought iron is. This building, it's nice as it is. If we're going to paint the whole building, then we have to paint all the fences and all the bricks and the gates, and it should all look that. kind of color.
So
If
you
we
would want to
can't-
do this color on the iron as well?
If we can't paint the whole building and all the fencing, and make it all look like it does now and make it all match, as it's looked for 30-something years apparently, we don't really have any proof that they were black.
Well, I
Unless
can bring by a photo. I'm sorry I did not
But
bring
I
the
just feel like
original.
we'll cheapen the building. I think
Okay.
it's very much a landmark as it is, and it's apparently been there since the 20s, if that's the
Okay.
story. And I just,
So
I don't
you'd
know
like to
why we
leave it
have to
white?
change it, you
Okay,
know?
we don't have to change it. We don't have to, no. We can leave it whitewashed white, and we can leave the gates white. If you feel that that's what you'd like to see, and it's not affecting the
Well, no,
historical
I
integrity.
think it's great you want to do something.
I don't think the point is that's what we'd like to see. I think the point is that what the
cohesive-
application was is to repaint the building. And
All the buildings. Now, obviously, I don't know if I made myself clear, but I would not
well,
just
it says
put
here,
this in
application
one.
by Ingleside Inn to repaint buildings. And
Yes.
And I applaud the fact that
Yes.
you are there as a professional and that you have done the investigation into what you think is the original color. It's just that we as a board don't have any way of knowing what you've done and how you've come to these conclusions.
Okay.
And I personally, not that I'm questioning your conclusion, I'd just
No.
like to see more of the process, the photographs, why you chose this sort of a cream color instead of the white color. And you know, this is
That
something
is
in
an oyster
between.
color, which we removed from, when I was here
So,
last.
that's my only request.
Yeah, they
I don't
asked
wanna-
me to do
I'm
some sort of a
pleased that
scraping of the
it's happening.
existing paint, which is what I did, and that's what you see there, which is an oyster color. So it was not always white. At some point, it was painted oyster. But it is my feeling that because of the three different influences involved with the property, that perhaps doing a glaze over the white would tie it in a little bit better. That's my personal opinion. And of course, if we were to do that and if you were to agree to it, we would do it in its entirety as much as possible. Some of the shrubs are very old and they actually support the walls. So if I remove those, the walls have a good possibility of crumbling underneath, which he does not want to address that at this point.
It sounds like there's some disagreement about what's weeds and what's shrubs between you and Mel Haber.
If I
And-
could,
yes,
excuse
go
me, if
ahead.
I could interject for a
Mhm,
minute. Without having the original designation in front of us, for a point of reference, what these designations protect is the exterior of the building. And unless the paint color is written into the designation, paint is usually viewed as something that can always be changed and returned to whatever the original was. So I think we're getting stuck on something that's not necessarily part of, the designation. And
Well, hopefully Jing has just run to get that piece of paper because I never saw it and I don't know what it says. However, I can tell you that my contract ends at the end of this month. And so we have really waited this long to meet with you in order
Well,
to address this
okay,
issue.
well, if you could just, I would just like, for your own understanding, we'll see the copy of the designation, but generally what they protect is the exterior from
Mhm.
any physical alteration. So,
So if I could bring you, if I run back to the hotel and I get the archive photograph of the hotel as it existed, the iron gates in graphite, it is of course a black and white picture, but it's not white, and I run it over to you and show it to you, then can we at least strip the white paint off the gates? Is that a problem?
well,
I personally prefer black wrought iron gates, but I just see it on this building, and I'm just wondering what the whole scheme is. I'm wondering what about the fences. I happen to like the color, too.
Okay.
And so, I don't think we all have a problem with that, but we all kind of want to know what it really was.
Let's see what.
That's all. Pleasantly, let's be pleasantly.
No,
and
I'm
thank you
pleasant.
for your
I'm
help.
so sorry I was late this morning, but you can imagine remodeling 30
was late, too.
rooms. There's always a crisis.
The resolution has two operative sections. One is the legal description of the property. The other one has to do with no permits or exterior alteration to the Ingleside Inn shall be granted without the prior approval of the HSPB. Alterations shall preserve the historic integrity of the site. And then, placement of a plaque on the property, which has been done.
It's just mostly these gates.
Traditionally, and I'll just give you a little bit of history. 5 or 10 years ago, staff would have probably worked with the owner and approved this without involvement of the HSPB. We may have or may not have even reported that we worked with them on a repaint, because historically, I think Jim accurately represented the issue of color, that we've tried to work with owners on color because it is changeable. What you might want to do, because they have waited, through the summer period to approach the HSPB, is if they can bring us an older photograph that we can clearly validate predates our knowledge and your knowledge of the property, and it's black, or dark. I think the presumption would be that that was the traditional color of the wrought iron, plus they've done the investigation to find out what is the underlying color. And if that's the case, that probably brings it back more to a historical. Now, obviously, somebody could have painted it in the early 1900s, a different color over the black, and it was only black for a short period of time when somebody snapped a picture. But I have to be a bit sympathetic that they have waited. They wanted to do this work this summer, and we delayed them so we could bring it up to the HSPB. And it's not uncommon for boards and commissions to say, we grant approvals subject to the following validation actions by the staff before the actual approval occurs. There will be times on some buildings that may have a Class 1 designation that a complete repaint to a different color makes sense for the owner. And, I've been talking to architects that one of these days we'll probably have things designated as historic in this town. They will all, including Stu Williams, always come back and talk about the need to have buildings that were designed for a client to suit the needs of clients in the future also, and that modifications are appropriate. And demolition sometimes can be appropriate. I think Stu Williams did a historical archive video, and I'll rely upon that one because Stu's still here for misquoting or mischaracterizing what I've seen, and I think he's one of our most respected architects, where he talked about the client needs and how important that was to what he designed in buildings. And I think we saw a building that Albert Frey worked on that probably had things that Albert didn't like in the design that were client-driven, because architects aren't the final authority on most building designs. The client, ultimately is and has influence. So if, and I've got confidence that we can take a look at photographs, and Mr. Haber has a pretty good collection of photographs of that property, and if it had a dark color and a black and white photograph, the question is, would that be an appropriate historical perspective?
I'd like to make a suggestion for the future when an application like this comes. I've been involved in other cities where historic boards have requested a paint color analysis. And I think we should have requested the photograph that she has. And, it's a black and white photograph, so it's going to show it as black, but it could be dark green black, it could be brown, dark brown, it could be slate black, it could be all sorts of things. And in some instances, just having a professional chip off the paint and do an original color analysis is important to restoring the building to its original look. In this case, it's really a decorative element, and as Jim points out, can be changed in the future if for some reason we want to restore it to the historical look.
Well, I just have a couple of quick questions based on the photographs. When you say the gates, I know there are gates at the entrance right there on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Are these the light fixtures you're talking about? And those would be stripped down and repainted black?
Correct.
Flat black, glossy black?
what I'd like to do is to have them be graphite with a little bit of rust patina on it. I want them to look historically old. I don't want them to look brand spanking new. I think the property should have a little bit of dignity.
And then I see banisters, which I've seen when I visit.
Those would be, again, black.
Black
The
as
same
well.
process that I'm speaking of.
I don't see any photographs of other light fixtures, other fixtures on the building itself.
There are fixtures on the building itself, but those fixtures are really very small plastic carriage lights. Apparently when Mr. Haber purchased this property 30 years ago, as I've said, a lot of the beautiful, probably very ornate fixtures were stripped in that property. And so because of his budget at the time, he put in very inexpensive fixtures.
So those are the
And
ones that he put in himself.
Those are the ones that he put in because there was nothing there. I mean, the walls were stripped. And it's interesting, when I came to Jing, I asked if there were any existing photographs, and there really aren't any. And a lot of it is up to what he can remember and what he can tell me, but from what I've seen, there is a need, and my firm would basically advise him, we would go out and collect old fixtures that are very similar to what is on the original pilasters there with the original fixtures. They would be wrought iron fixtures, they would be within the same time period as those. And little by little over time, we would like to collect the appropriate fixtures as we believe that they existed at one point. However, there aren't a lot of interior photographs of the hotel. There are photographs of the original rooms, of the dining room, and of the entry. That's it. Now, I haven't been able to find anything else, so really.
Looking at this photograph as well, this is I'm not sure where this gate is. Is that the exit
That's
gate?
the exit gate, and the cornucopias on top, that existed when he purchased it. So I would not change that.
You would leave those white?
I would leave those white.
But paint these gates black?
But those gates
Or
would
strip
be.
them black?
I would strip them, and I would make them graphite with a little bit of sort of a rust patina to them so that they would look old. Again, what I'm trying to do is to have some uniformity with the coloration, the gates, so that it looks classy, so that it looks elegant.
Okay.
Right now, it's whitewashed all over in many different variations of white. And the gates are so thick with the white paint now over them that they're peeling. I mean, I can really peel them down. I probably could get a scraping of the original black. But really what I'm trying to do is to bring it to an old world feeling, and obviously it would be as complete as possible. We wouldn't do it, incomplete. It would be the entire thing or nothing.
One thing that we've done, Chev here has done a survey of historic plaques that are visible, and based on his investigation, he could not find the designation plaque.
I'm sure Mr. Haber would be more than happy to have the historic plaque there. It seems as though this committee is much more together, so to speak. I don't know what happened years ago, but in that there are no photographs of how it looked when he purchased the property. So I do have archives that have been hanging in the hotel that he purchased along with the hotel when he bought it. I will be happy to bring in the photograph immediately of the gate, or any exterior showing the wrought iron gate that I have. And other than that, I have done the scraping as you had suggested in the last meeting, which indicates that the property was not always white. It was at one point oyster. I did also find some other scrapings of celadon green and other atrocious colors that I can't even believe they would apply. But this is where we're headed. This is what we'd like to do. We have a very limited time frame in which to get this done now because we are already in the first week of September. Not to add any pressure.
Well, because of the fact that at least from a personal perspective, The last thing I want this board to be perceived at as being inhibiting the replacement or not replacement, but refurbishment or upgrading of one of our historic sites. I'd like to suggest that we consider a motion approving these paint changes as requested, subject to staff reviewing. We don't need a committee, I think, here, but subject to staff reviewing the old photographs and confirming that they were
Right.
black at that time. Would anyone like to propose a motion?
I will so move that motion, that we approve, subject to staff review and acceptance of the colors.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? See, we're not such bad people to work with.
Thank you so much.
Who's
If
going
I-
to do the follow-up
if I-
about the,
Oh,
I will go right in and to Jane
well, I
with
meant
the
the follow-up
photograph.
about the plaque?
Like,
Oh,
we will do that as part of
Okay.
this permit application.
I would just like to
We'll
make
probably find it's got some landscape.
one
around it.
final comment that has nothing to do with the approval. I don't know how everybody else feels about this, but personally, in terms of restoration, I don't think restoration requires artificial aging. When we talk about the original colors, and we talk about returning it to the original state as built. It's not about as built with 100 years of aging on it. So personally, I don't feel it needs the faux finishing you're talking about.
okay, you
But-
prefer the white.
Not the white. I would prefer an oyster or off-white and
Okay.
a straight black. But that's my personal opinion, and it's not a binding part of this motion. But I thought I'd get it out there.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And, you know, we are leading towards this, however, I'm not sure it can be accomplished within the time frame that we now have left. So you may not see anything happen. But at least it's approved if he so wishes to proceed when he can. And that's why I'm here. So just to add, it may not change. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Jing, you'll follow up with the photograph?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll leave this with you.
If I can just briefly, before we move on, one thing I think may be helpful going forward when we have these is to ask the folks that are coming forward to supply archival photographs so we have those to look at as this is happening, because all we had were the current photographs. And also, if we could get the copy of the designation for the property we're talking about as part of our packet prior to the meeting, that would be helpful.
And then the other thing that, as I expressed, concerned me a little bit, the application was actually not all-encompassing of what they really wanted to do. And you may not have been aware of that, but it seems like there's more than just repainting the building, so. But, moving on to the next agenda item, work program discussion for HSPB 2003 and 2004. I've asked that that be added to the agenda because we had developed a program for last year, which I think we did a pretty good job of fulfilling. I'm not even sure I brought a copy of it, unfortunately. But I thought we might discuss at this time the historic site survey, which is coming up, and how we intend to utilize that and act upon that. Can you give us do we have that? That's not on the agenda. Can you give us kind of an update on how the survey is progressing in the upcoming meetings and what we'll be discussing at those meetings?
Sure. Basically, what's happened is Architectural Resources Group, the project team, came down this past August to complete essentially their windshield reconnaissance survey. Subsequently, they put together a sort of list of all the properties that they looked at when they were down here in Palm Springs, and gave it to staff. And we are actually scheduling, and that's why we sent out the email to all of you whether you'd be available next week. We sent out the notices, which I'll just pass around. So copies there. We sent out a letter to all the property owners, who were on that reconnaissance survey.
And how many
essentially
were
to
there on the survey?
It was about 150 to 200. Unfortunately, there were about 40 to 50 properties that were obscured that the project team was unable to access when they were down here, so that's something that we have to work with them on in terms of obtaining permission to, from the property owners to, go on those properties. But as of right now, we have essentially it's a Historic Sites Preservation Board, workshop study session setting next week afternoon. We put it in the afternoon because it seems that in terms of inviting the public, 3:30 to 4 seems to be a good time generally for people to.
And that's the one that we have scheduled, what day again?
That's next week, September the 16th.
And everyone's aware of that?
3:30 PM, right. I had Loretta send out the facts and the.
Can we get, before we have this public meeting, as members of the board, can we get
You will get a full
list?
packet for that meeting, yes.
Okay.
You will.
And when will the survey, I'm a little confused on the number again. You said there's 150 to 200 properties that were identified by the team,
Right.
but 40 or 50 of those they weren't able to access? Or to
No,
see?
no, there's 150 that they were able to actually see, and then an additional 40 to 50 that they couldn't see, and they couldn't access
And
or get on the
will they
property.
be allowed access to those?
And, yeah, they have to work together with us, staff's gonna give them a hand in terms of contacting property owners and.
So those will be included as part of the survey?
Conceivably, well,
If we
yeah.
can get the owner's permission to evaluate the property.
Exactly.
We have no right to go onto the property if it's secure.
Right.
Okay, will we get a list of both those that have been surveyed, initially surveyed, and
You will
those that
get
were not?
Yeah, it's a spreadsheet. You'll have a packet. It'll be prepared this week, and you'll have it before the meeting next week.
And what is the completion target date for the survey?
For the survey, the estimated target date is, I believe it's March 2004. You have it in your scope of services with you.
Mhm.
We just got this, so I can't read it all that fast.
Okay, this is our first meeting for the HSPB of the year. Is there board member discussion about what you would like to see us accomplish as a board during the next year? Former president, maybe, current chairman, maybe you would like to address that?
Well,
Well, one of the outstanding issues from last year that I think was to be addressed by the city attorney, I think, was this delisting or de-designation process. And I'm hoping that that process can be somehow put before us and implemented into the general plan as part of that rewrite.
I'm sorry, did you say a declassification process?
Well, that was the holdup. with
We
the-
have a formal request to declassify. There is nothing in our ordinance that says how you do that. Logic would say you would do it in the same process that you list. You just go backwards. You have a public hearing with the HSPB, you make a recommendation that goes up to council, the city attorney, and looking at that and recognizing that the field of historic preservation in California is becoming much more rigorously tested by people that have advocacy positions or ownership positions on property. So the city attorney does feel we need to put a provision in the ordinance that says, how do you delist and what's the process? And in other ordinances in Palm Springs, we basically say the process to undo this is the same as it was to establish it. And that's as detailed as it needs to be. So they file an application, a request, and then we basically go through the process I just articulated. Whether you want to ever delist a property or not is not the issue. It's legally, should you have a process to do it? And I think that the answer there is going to be clearly yes, because the question's been asked.
Right, and the other property has been left in limbo because we have no process. Is that correct?
And I think that property owner's comfortable with limbo right now, and that's probably for all parties a place that it's been for a while, and I don't think either party has a need to push real aggressively, because we've got some other things happening in the courts that we're all watching, to really determine what the authority of the city may be long-term. And and we've given you briefings on some of that court activity, and so far it looks very good in favor of community regulation of religious institutions. But there's an appeal of that, that's underway, and some real questioning even by the judge that ruled in favor of local government. So that one's gonna play out for a while, and it has national implications, and any time that occurs, judges will always be very cautious and err on the side of continued evaluation. Same thing that we're doing here. With regards to that issue of updating the historic site preservation ordinance, the city attorney and staff have reported to the board previously, not this makeup of the board, but it is in your work program to update that ordinance. We actually need to take a look at what do we do with the survey. What is the official status of the survey? It should be addressed in the ordinance. So as we start working through the ordinance, there are going to be multiple areas that we need to look at, and so it's a little bit broader work program issue than just declassification.
Do we need to formalize on paper, either at this meeting, next meeting, workshop, through you, a written work program for our board? I think it would be a good idea.
We're probably going to have the board take action approving a work program probably at your January meeting. I need to submit a work program for all the boards and commissions that we provide staff services to, and I think the date of that is early in February, and that's for council consideration. What we'll do is we'll give everybody the existing work program, and then we can have a discussion of what you would like to do. There's some items that are on your agendas that need to probably be added to the work program or refined in the work program. I haven't looked at it for a while. And I think that you've got a good start on next year's work program. It's your agenda right here.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The work program, the things that I see as part of our work program this year, I had Loretta add to the agenda, at least most of them. And so with that in mind, why don't we move along to item number 2, which is the media outreach. Board Member Bledsoe, do you have any thoughts on that?
Actually, it was not me, I don't think.
I wasn't ready to move on.
I'm sorry.
Just in response to Doug Evans, to say that that there should be a declassification process to make the answer clearly yes, I disagree 100%. I think this is what we're doing. This is why we have a historic preservation, and this is a very new city. Think of what if the new owners of the Empire State Building said, oh, we don't want to do that anymore? Then what would happen to our society? So I think I also disagree with the city attorney. It's not that I want to fight the church, but as evidenced today, we are certainly agreeable to work with everyone all the time, and to spend more time and effort to create a thing where everybody can just leave, then I don't know why I would want to sit here. It's all a waste of our time. So I have to say, I think it's to say clearly no to that. But if we're going to work on this for months and months and months and pay a whole bunch of money and do everything to attorneys and change all the laws, I don't know why we have a preservation board. So that's all I have to say to it.
Thank you. Any other comments on that issue? I think philosophically we all agree with you, but I think it's more of a legal issue, as Doug has expressed, and those are things that may be beyond our control, all of us. Any other comments? Well, Media Outreach Subcommittee, I guess that was Board Member Rush. Sorry.
Actually, I don't have anything new to report. I think we're probably going to be touching on some of the issues in the discussion of agenda item number 4. And a lot of our outreach is tied to the completion of the survey and the dissemination of that information. So if we could keep this as an agenda item for the next meeting.
We did discuss the possibility of the city press officer who, and I forget the name, doing something about the survey being approved. Was there anything that was released on that, or have we gotten any?
Right, actually, we're working with her right now on putting together a press release for the survey. She was on vacation until yesterday, so, you know, we'll get one out soon on the survey. If I also may give an update with regards to, I believe you'd spoken before about doing photographs, you know, or doing some sort of brochure or something from the HSPB. Staff did meet with Rick Lee and Omar Gulam, our two, you know, with Palm Springs Access, and Omar has, you know, offered to photograph some of the sites, and I think we're going to work with, is it Board Member Rush, and I believe, is it you, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, who are the subcommittee for the media outreach?
Are we talking about the photographs for Channel 17?
Right,
Okay.
that's the one. I
Excellent.
think it's you two, so we'll continue to work on you in terms of developing a program for that photograph.
So what do we're going to meet with them? We need to meet with them? or-
No, staff has met with them this week,
Okay.
and we spoke about, you know, what they can do and budget limitations, and, you know, basically we found that we need to, you know, work together with the subcommittee in terms of developing exactly what it is that you'd like to see photographed, and, you know, how this is all going to come together, so.
So the
will.
subcommittee and staff need to schedule a meeting to
That's
discuss that?
correct, right, we'll be in touch.
Okay, excellent. Agenda item number 3, Historic Site Plaque Survey. Board Member Rush again.
Okay, the historic site plaque survey, if we can all consider this kind of a living document, as I think there will be changes to it as we go along. There are a couple things up front. I inadvertently left off Francis Stevens School on this list, so I will be revising that and redistributing it at the next meeting to include that. Also, the list that I used to compile this was the most recent Class 1 historic designation list, which I believe is dated July 9th, 2001. I would like to ask staff if they could take a look at their records versus this list and see if there's anything that was missing from that July 9th, 2001 document that did not get included in this audit, and I'd be glad to add those properties and check the status. The other two properties that you won't see on this list are the Grace Lewis Miller House, because they have not received their plaque yet, and the Idris House, because it was just, the designation was just approved, so those are not included on this document either.
How about the Wexler?
The Wexlers are included. We have, unfortunately, I forgot to write down my counts of how many are visible versus how many are not visible, but we can look through this briefly. If you can look under the fourth row under the visible section, number 42, those are the Wexler Steel homes. They are all visible with the exception of 3133 North Sunnyview Drive. That's the property that we reviewed. I can't remember which meeting, but about 4 or 5 months ago, they brought their work program. That was under renovation. Then subsequently in meetings, I think we've discussed there was some damage done to, or demolition done to one of the original walls on the property, which I believe they were then going to repair. So we may want to just keep an eye on this and, you know, look at what's happened with the work program there, and then pursue the placking of that once those issues are resolved. Under not visible, which starts with the last item on the front of this page, we have the majority of our residential structures under the Class 1 historic site designation. The Wexler homes, I believe, are the only residential structures we were able to verify did have visible plaques. Among the residential structures that do not, that are designated, are the Carrie Perosi House at Via Escuela West, the Lowy House on Panorama Road West, the Kaufman Harris House on Vistachino, and the the O'Donnell House and the Frey House 2, which are the last two items on this sheet, are on private roads, and I was not able to access those. But that the plaque, the criteria for this audit was, you know, is the plaque visible from public right-of-way? So I wanted to also ask staff's help there in possibly contacting the owners and determining whether, they indeed have a plaque, and if they do, is it on their property, or would it be possible, I believe Frey House 2 is accessed from Palisades Drive, which is just past La Valerie. Possibly there's a way of plaquing it at the beginning of the private road. And the same may be true for the O'Donnell houses. I believe that's accessed through the Country Club, which is a private road as well.
And just walking around on one occasion, I thought the Oasis Hotel Tower had a plaque, but it's not on the street. It's back inside there somewhere, isn't it? Or am I correct?
Well, are you guys aware of that? Well, we walked that area and we're not able to find it. It may be there and just well hidden, but the approach that was taken was from Palm Canyon directly back in that alleyway that goes between next to the building, and it was not visible from that area, nor is it visible from the parking lot in the back. So there may be another area I'm not aware of, a right-of-way area I'm not aware of where it is, but I wasn't able to find it.
And I think that's probably a good test. Is it easily visible? These shouldn't be buried and hidden. It's a public issue of the designation, and the plaques were put up with public monies. We'll have to double check some of the files. I wasn't directly involved in plaquing some of the older properties, so I don't have any recollection. And some of the properties that are not visible, I believe the plaques are there, but they were either intentionally and knowingly put in places that you could not see, or over time they've become invisible or maybe have moved. So we'll have to do a little background. Some of the designations specifically talk about property shall be plaqued in a public location, where it's visible. Some it's vague, some it doesn't say anything about the visibility of the plaque. And then we have at least one property that maybe a new plaque with our new design might be something the owners would be more comfortable with to have in a location that's public, although on that particular residence, they've always had the concern that they just get too much interest, which invades their privacy. So it's a delicate balance when you start getting into homes. The Perosi plaque is, up the driveway, on the best rock that they could find the day that they installed it, and probably should have been installed, on a different type of setting, or a little bit more work done to find a boulder that would fit. But it's there, but you have to walk up the driveway almost to the front of the house to see it, and that's really inappropriate for a private residence.
I've never been able to find that one, and I have looked.
Yeah, you have to go up. You have to go up on the property. You can't see it from the street, so you're almost at the entryway to where you would walk up to the entry of the house. So you have to go quite a distance on the property to see that one.
And the intention here was to audit whether or not the plaque was visible enough that you didn't have to trespass in order to locate it.
And that was the test I think the board asked you to take. And on a commercial property, if it's in one of the public open corridors, the question we might have, is that a reasonable location if we, in fact, at the Oasis building, go back out and find it. But we'll take a look at these, and I think it's great work on your behalf to do the audit and show us where we need to maybe work with some property owners to make some adjustments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Rush, very much for that. That's a lot of work.
Did you format this?
Yes.
Could
Yes.
I make a suggestion, just so that they're not missed?
Mm-hmm.
Could you have another page or break and list future plaques?
Oh, yes.
So that every document we have that's plaque-driven has work yet to be done?
Yes, and so in the next meeting, I will issue a revised document with that future plaques added and Francis Stevens School under the appropriate
All
column.
right. Thank you.
Could we use this document, or perhaps the one at the next meeting, to generate a letter, perhaps, to property owners who have not properly plaqued their buildings? from the
Well,
city?
first we have to find out and make sure that the plaques aren't installed, but in a place we can't find. because all the plaques, to my knowledge, were installed with at least a staff member's involvement. So what we have to do is just backtrack, and what we don't want to do is send a letter, and I'll use the Perosi residents because they're such good friends of the city, and I know the history, you know, where that's where the city installer installed it, you know, and you know, so we don't want to send them the same type of letter. We want to send them a letter that says we'd like to work with you to relocate the plaque and put it in the right location. And unfortunately, our gentleman that's installed almost all of the plaques did retire, and he used to do that, you know, kind of just as a service, and you know, so our historic plaquer, you know, has retired, and John did a great job of working with people, and if you've seen his installations, they're seamless, and a little bit awkward for a city employee to work on private property.
It might be helpful to say, for instance, on the Carrie Perosi house, I didn't realize it had been installed, so if we could say installed but not visible, if there are other ones too.
Well, the purpose of the survey was just to see if it was visible.
Yeah, but we don't,
So-
some of them, we don't know if they're not installed.
Well, I think that's what staff needs to go
Yeah,
back
and that's what we'll do and try to
and
work
then they
with.
should come back and tell us that
Right.
it's somewhere, we just couldn't find it. Because I know that Oasis Hotel plaque is, I've found that one, but you have to wander all the way back in there, and it's, I mean, you gotta be looking for it to find it.
Yeah. I don't know which wall you scaled to find that one, but I
Actually walk up the tower, no.
So what we'll do is we'll work with Board Member Rush to try to get some footnotes so that, you know, you're clearly knowledgeable about, you know, what are the issues relative to these plaques. Cork and Bottle may not be plaqued at all because the property owner adamantly opposed the designation, and I doubt if they gave us permission to come on the property. That's my recollection. I don't know the current property owner, but I do remember that was one of the few properties the council designated over the objections of the property owner. And that occurred in the same time frame as the Ingleside Inn.
Just for clarification, if, in a situation like that, does the city have the authority to put a plaque? No. If the property owner
We can't
refuses?
trespass.
Okay.
We would be tampering with private property without permission, and we wouldn't touch that. And I don't think there's a vehicle to do that, because, you know, property owner didn't want the designation to begin with, so why would they be compliant with the request? Now, what we might find is we have a new property owner that may have pride in the fact that the building is designated, and we might find they'd be interested in plaquing it. We've got funds to add plaques. So let us do some research and find out which ones may intentionally not have plaques, and then which ones might be hidden, and then we can define which ones may have moved, if any.
One other point that this reminded me in compiling this, that at an earlier meeting, we had a discussion about, I believe the Kaufman-Harris House was in the process of applying for the Mills Act, and that is that correct?
No, they've already,
They've already received that.
but one of the criteria for,
Is to have the plaque.
to have the
Okay.
plaque visible to the public.
Okay.
So I've been told it's there, and the question is, you know, whether or not it's visible. I know they did not like the bronze plaque, and at the time, that was the only plaque we would allow. So we might be able to go back in and work with them to put the appropriate design plaque, and that may change some of their concern.
Okay, moving along, because it is getting late. Items number 4 and number 5 really are the same, and perhaps on the next agenda, we could just consolidate those into number 4. Outreach to and informational meeting with potential historic site property owners, and board member updates on contacts with potential historic site property owners. Item number 5 was when we picked 3 or 4 each that we were going to try and interest in designating their property, and I'm pleased to say that the Idris House was a result of that. So, but item number 4, I visualize as more the folks who are identified in the survey, and how do we chat with them in a way, hold a meeting, and do informational seminar or something that would interest them. It's probably something that we'll discuss more after the survey is done. but I would like any input that you had on the information I gave you at the last meeting, and your thoughts on that.
Well, I think we're going to jump right into that in a jump start situation when we invite people in next week to talk about the survey, because the first question is, if somebody has an interest, what are the benefits, what are the pros, cons of designation? So we'll be ready to answer in, that context. And I think, again, even last week's council meeting, the comments were made by our elected officials that it's nice to have willing property owners, is when we have that meeting and we're all mingling or listening and we find somebody that has interest, those are the ones we go and talk to first, not the ones that come in and say, you've invaded my privacy. Because we might find we've got a whole work program coming right out of it of people that are willing and ready. So next week we have to be ready for some discussion. As with anything, we want to pique interest, find out where the interest is, and then triage those that we really think are the ones that we can be successful with. Get them now before the properties change hands again. So I think we're going to jumpstart that, and we'll probably end up with, another level of work coming right out of that, which is the intent of the survey.
The format of the meeting next week is the HSPB is going to be around the table with property owners here, or what is the format? Is it going to be in this room, first of all?
Yeah, we had envisioned it being in this room. We actually discussed it with a consultant about sort of the best way to go about it. And what they had recommended is that, we do it sort of as a workshop setting with opportunity for the board to ask questions, but also with the opportunity for, typically for like public comments or something in the beginning. That's the way that they've done it in the past when they've done surveys in other cities. So we sort of adopted that sort of program for the meeting next week.
The board would be around the table with the public.
Right,
Okay.
right.
I mean, you can run the meeting a number of different ways. If we set it up just like this and they make a presentation, the public's response will be, this is a formal meeting, and that maybe it's further down the road than maybe they thought. If you want to be in the audience, it presents a less formal position. We can obviously have everybody introduced, and then, depending on, maybe some of our final discussions with the applicant or the consultants, we could then have you maybe come up to the table because there may be some real good opportunity to establish contacts. It's real hard to predict how people respond. In our neighborhood meetings that we've been having, in some cases on very potentially contentious issues, absolutely the least formal presentation and meeting format has been the most successful. The more formal, the more lecture-driven format hasn't worked as well because people react differently. So we'll set it up any way that you would like in conjunction with the consultant. But if you set it up like this, it becomes a formal meeting, and we have to run it like a formal meeting. If we just say that and post it that the HSPB board members are going to be here, it's a bit less formal than this way. We can set it up any way that's necessary.
Excuse me, in that situation, Architectural Resources Group is who's presenting and answering questions then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they take the lead role. Staff is there to kind of facilitate and guide. And then the board would be there to listen. And then if appropriate, maybe take a more active role. But, it's a real challenge as to, what's the meeting format.
And in that situation, we meet the following day to make an official motion.
At that point, you meet the following day to have a more official discussion and dialogue, and we let people know that you're doing that so that if they want to come back, they certainly can. But again, there's it's a discussion item on your follow-up day, You know, it's not an action-driven, you know, meeting, it's more discussion.
It's 3:30 on the 16th, but when in the morning on the 17th?
When we'd sent out the fax and emails to you, I think it's like 10:30. Is that a pretty comfortable time for everyone, or, I mean, can I sort of? Yeah, I mean, I can adjust the time to meet, you know, the board's.
The earlier,
pleasure.
yeah, the
8:15?
earlier the better.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put it right 8:15 in the morning then, okay.
8:15, and that would be on the 17th.
That would be the 17th, right?
Have you received, first of all, this is dated September. This letter is dated September the 5th. Have you
Yes.
received any response from any property owners?
Not yet. It actually takes the mail a couple of days because they send it out and it comes back. So
I
it's-
expect
yeah.
you will, where it says your property was identified by the project team as a potential property to be surveyed and documented. I would suggest, for the purpose of the meeting, that if there's a way that the architectural team could present to us and the public as if we were all one, and I would also suggest that the team do a little backtrack and give a history of what the survey is and why we're doing it and the benefits of the survey and sort of sell that. I'm sure they're planning to, more for the benefit of the public than for us.
Yeah.
And then go
Yeah.
into the details.
Yeah, I think everyone that I talk to who has a potentially historic house is amazed to find out they can save on their property taxes. Nobody knows that, and so I think the issue should be brought up, and I'll bet you we should have a lot of that documentation available to pass out to people. What's it called? The
Mills Act.
Mills Act. That if they apply for historic designation, they can actually have a reduction in their taxes. We'll get a lot of people interested in getting their houses listed or their properties
Mhm.
listed.
And it's a substantial reduction as well. You did say we'll get a list in advance of the properties that are potentially on the survey list, right?
That's correct, right?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any other discussion about items 1 through 5, which basically is the work program for this year? Item number 6, discussion of city's historic site preservation ordinance. Doug, any updates on that?
We've already touched it.
Yeah.
Okay. Item number 7, Item number 7, Palm Springs Preservation Foundation.
Yeah, the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation is developing a very interesting program for the weekend of Friday, November 14th and Saturday, November 15th. We will be celebrating the Spanish Revival architecture of Palm Springs, a opening event on Friday, and then a bus tour of selected properties, some that have never been open to the public before. We're also putting together an extensive journal that will have photographs and documentation about the design of the period, and we anticipate it to be very well attended. It will be a bus tour and therefore limited, and so those who are interested in coming, I hope, will sign up when you see about the availability. It's going to be very exciting, and we're pleased to be putting this on. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a limited amount of time left, I was just told. So item number 8, Palm Springs Historical Society.
I'll be brief. It's still closed for the summer, so as soon as it reopens, I'll let you know.
Item number 9, Palm Springs Modern Committee. I'll give the brief update, and that is that there was no meeting in August. The next meeting is going to be this Saturday at 10 o'clock, and it's going to be in a private home, which is a mid-century home at 605 Crescent Drive. All of those who are interested in attending.
If I could add one thing to the ModCom report.
Sure.
Apparently, I don't know why it wasn't in our package, but the ModCom has made a stance on the state of the Biltmore property and has sent a letter to the city that was CC'd to the HSPB, if I'm correct.
Okay.
And-
We'll double check. I mean, if they CC'd, you know, typically we try to get it to you, but we've got multiple staff members working on that, so we'll make sure that you get copies of it.
Okay, because I would like a report for the HSPB on what the state of the Biltmore really is.
Is there an interim report or short-term report you can give us on that at this point, Doug, or is that something we...
Well, very quickly, property is either has or is coming out of bankruptcy. There's a new buyer. It's a development buyer. They went into the bankruptcy proceeding with the intent of acquisition based upon the city council having already directed and filed court motions to have the property demolished. And the ModCom letter has been referred to the city attorney, and they're currently looking at it.
Well, if I'm correct, the Biltmore was always on the unofficial HSPB survey.
And this council went through a very, very public process to designate the property and notify the property owner that it was a public nuisance. And, the only reason that building is probably still there today is the fact the bankruptcy proceeding stopped it, because we were in Superior Court discussing the issue of getting the court order to demolish. Tremendous amount of neighborhood input over the past 3 or 4 years. So, that's the status of where we were. The bankruptcy stopped the California court process because it was a federal action, and at the time it was going through a fairly public process with multiple council meetings. Nobody really stepped up and said, save the Biltmore. In fact, it was large numbers of people talking about the problems of the property. So the ModCom report or letter was given to the city attorney, and they're looking at it.
Does the age of the building qualify it as a Class 3?
Yes. Class 3.
And does that require any action by this board?
Class 3 properties technically don't have any status. There could be a stay of demolition. Council's already taken given us the directive on what their intentions have been. So those issues are being evaluated by the city attorney.
The only reason I ask is because we had a Class 3 applicant that came in and requested information on making changes just today, so, which I was pleased he was here, but I didn't realize that was actually necessary, but I'm glad he did come before us.
Typically, we wouldn't actually. It was because it involved a little bit of a demolition of the building, and that's why it was, if it had been something of, I guess, a smaller scale, it wouldn't have been brought before the board.
Thank you for the update, Mr. Evans. Thank you.
If we could just make an announcement, if the TV coverage goes off, it's because we have an allotted time period with programming needs. The HSPB meeting will finish up here shortly, but at the end of the meeting, it's gone.
Yeah, we're ready.
Oh, okay. Never mind.